Alright, we're out here with Myrtle Beach Drift Series. This is one of the practice days at the Freestyle Music Park. Today, on my AE86, I'm testing out the Flos Quick Rack. So I read a bunch of reviews online. People don't seem to like the Quick Rack for drifting for some reason. It really doesn't make any sense to me. I would think it'd be great, but anyway, the Flos Quick Rack has a couple of additional things. It's got a couple extra teeth cut in it so you can get some more steering angle. It also comes with a brand new housing with a metal bushing instead of the plastic one that the AW11 manual rack has. So today I'm going to test it out. We're going to see what we think. We're going to see if everybody who doesn't like it, if they're right, or maybe it's just a driving preference. Alright, we're going to run through some picture comparisons real quick so you can see the differences between the AE86 manual rack, the AW11 manual rack, and the Flos Quick Rack. So the top rack in this picture is for the AE86. This is a stock AE86 manual rack. The middle one is an AW11 rack, and the bottom is the Flos rack. So obviously you can see the Flos has a brand new housing. It looks a little bit different aesthetically compared to the AW11 and the AE86. One of the other big differences you should see is the AW11 has a much taller pinion than the AE86 rack and the Flos rack. So this usually doesn't cause an issue for people, but for some people like me who have a beam swap, what this actually does is it can cause some exhaust clearance issues. So having an AE86 manual rack or a Flos rack makes it a lot easier to get your exhaust made, and so you've got more clearance for the intermediate shaft and the U-joint. So here's the end of the Flos Quick Rack. You can see the bushing style is a little different. If you're familiar with the AW11 rack, it's got a plastic bushing that slides in there. Now, I said earlier that it was a metal bushing that's in this end. I actually don't know for certain. I put it in and I thought it was, but I haven't actually looked closely at it. So Flos, if you're listening or watching, correct me on this if I'm wrong, if that's a plastic bushing or not. Here's a picture of the AW11 rack bushing. It's kind of hard to see because it's really gross in there, but on the kind of like the left side, the very top of the inside, you can see it's a little white. That's the white bushing that you replace. It's a plastic or a Delrin or some type of bushing. Whenever I pull an AW11 rack from the junkyard, I always replace that. It's usually crusty and in pieces. Alright, so here's the other big difference. Here's the Flos Quick Rack. The length is about 15 3/4 inches. I actually think it is. The picture's taking a little bit of an angle. Here is the AE86 manual rack. You can see it is 15 3/4 inch in length. And then here's the AW11 rack, 16.5 inches. So that's 3/4 of an inch longer than the AE86 and the Flos rack. And what this does is this actually causes an issue when you are looking for more steering angle, because essentially this is limiting your angle 3/4 of an inch sooner than the AE86 rack or the Flos rack. I've heard of some people who will actually chop down the housing 3/4 of an inch and shorten it and then weld it back together. But in that case, you might as well just go buy a Flos rack. The other difference here is the difference in teeth. The AE8 or the Flos rack actually has a few more teeth cut in it. Like I said, it gives you a little bit more steering angle. This way you don't run out of rack travel because the housing is shorter, and you also don't run out of rack travel because you've got a few more teeth. This actually lends, I think, to drifting pretty well. All right, let's get on to some of the videos so you can see how I like it and kind of see what my impressions are. It's a little harder to steer at slow speeds. But once you get moving, it's really not bad. Okay, that's kind of annoying. So, I mean, yeah, this is a full manual rack, so it's gonna be a little harder to steer. The stock, or the AW11 manual rack I had in my car, just with how much steering angle I have with rack spacers, and I've got slightly longer steering knuckles, yeah, it was it was about 4 turns lock to lock. So this is only 2 3/4 turns lock to lock. So it's really not bad. I mean, yeah, it's quite a bit quicker, but see, once you get moving, I mean, really, it feels great. There's no problems once you're moving.
how it feels while going sideways. All right, here we go. Time to test the Flos quick rack. The quick rack is definitely going to take some getting used to. It is a lot faster than the stock rack. But I think the big thing is that if you're not constantly adjusting with your hands and you're using your throttle to steer more, you'll probably be okay. I try and steer as much with the throttle as possible, and it seems to help quite a bit. Here's run number 2 with the quick rack. Number 2. Oh man, this thing is awesome. I love it.
Alright guys, let's wrap it up. As you saw, there are some technical differences between the Flos rack and the AW11 rack. The rack housing is shorter. The steering ratio is obviously quicker. There's also more teeth cut in it for more travel. Now, for me, I really enjoyed this. Drifting with it seemed easier because I didn't have to turn it as much, and when I was making adjustments while drifting, they're very small. When you're drifting with an AW11 rack, you end up making larger adjustments. I think it was also nice having this freshly rebuilt rack versus an old clapped out rack. Having anything brand new really tightened up the steering for me. Now, not everybody's going to drive the same way I do. My car, I have about 5.5 degrees of caster, I've got negative 7.5 degrees of camber, and about 55 degrees of steering angle. Because of all this, the quick rack seemed to work well for me. The car self-steers really well, and my driving style is I steer with the throttle more than I do with the wheel. And because of this, I think it really, the quick rack really helped me out. It may not be a big change, it may not really make me that much better of a driver, but I can say honestly, it's not like I didn't like it. There was nothing to me that took away from driving that made it more difficult to drive. Other than at slow speeds, yeah, it's hard to turn. So I think the next step for me is to try and get an electric steering setup. Now, this will be something that'll come later on down the road. There are some pitfalls to electric power steering. Essentially, I'll be using an electric motor on the column like in the Toyota Yaris, or a couple other cars like the Prius and the FRS, and there's a bunch of other cars that are done this way. And having an electric column, what that does is that actually slows down how quick the car can self-steer. So by doing the quick rack, it might actually help with that, but we'll see later on down the road. The thing to take away from this is that if you steer with the throttle more, steer with the wheel less, you won't notice a difference with the quick rack. It might actually be easier because you don't have to whip it so hard because it steers so much faster. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. Reach out to me, Dr. Garage on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. I'm not on Twitter, but shoot me a message, drop me a line, let me know if you got any questions, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Thanks for watching, guys.